Hi, and welcome back. And he's David.
And he's David.
And we love IT professionals.
That's right,
what
we
can
do.
I say?
We love
We're going to walk through a few sessions here, and we're going to look, and now that we've got Active Directory set up in Windows Azure and federated with just about everything.
It's all working. Your identity problems are solved now.
There is no identity problem. What we're going to do is walk through migrating applications from on-premises into Windows Azure. So first thing, migrating VMs and disks. So we've already talked a lot about just the fact that we're using the VHD disk format, not the VDX format. Just say that again. And it's the same format as we use on-premises with Hyper-V. So really, the only thing we have to kind of talk about is how we get that file, that big 200 gig file, into Windows Azure, right? I mean, that's the top and bottom of it. So on-premises, we might have an application, we might have an OS disk, we might have data disks, and we want to copy those up into a storage account in Windows Azure. And equally, we could then copy them back down again, should we desire. And this is quite a powerful kind of thing for Windows Azure, because it allows you to transport and move applications and workloads between Windows Azure and your data center. And in fact, you can even move to other environments too that support the VHD disk format. So we think this is pretty powerful and pretty enabling for you guys.
This is a big difference, right? This is a big deal for us because right, we have.
It feels awkward because there's a little tiny piece of me that's like, I don't want you going putting your VHD anywhere. Like, keep it in Azure. It's all good.
This is where I have to come and reel you back in as the evangelist.
And I'm supposed to be in marketing. And I'm supposed to say nice things, but
that's right.
It's like,
so,
no, keep your VHD here.
Well, we realize. Hey, I'm going to give you the sanity check here. We realize that you might want to put your VHD in different places, okay? And so that's why we have this slide here to let you know that if you have, let's say, private cloud on premise, and you have, maybe other service providers that you want to use. For instance, you're in a geographic region where maybe Azure still doesn't have this really random, security certification or something you need for your local country. You could possibly have those same VHDs published from your on-prem over to that service provider, or from that service provider up to Azure. Yeah. There's kind of this nice story that you can have between on-premise, Windows Azure Public Cloud, and a service provider, because we're using that industry standard, and we even have tools like System Center to help support that.
Absolutely. So VHD, sharing is good. Okay, let's move on.
All right, let's keep going.
Let's have a look. Bring your own server VHD on premises. It might be running virtual server. In fact, we actually got asked, and I typed heavily to the answer to this earlier. If you wanted to take a physical disk and move it into Windows Azure, what could you do? Well, we have tooling around converting physical disks into VHDs, and I believe, if I remember rightly, the tool is called Disk to VHD. Is that right?
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's a sysinternals tool. Yeah.
That's right, and it'll make a VHD out of your disk, and then you can copy that into Windows Azure.
Yep.
And all is good.
So one little tip on that, though, right? You need to make sure, because one unique thing about Azure is you get one network card, and it needs to be DHCP.
Yeah.
So if you go and you have static IPs
don't do that, because that wastes a good hour or two uploading the VHD. Tip for you.
Tip for you. Make sure you before you save your VHD, set it to have one network card and to use DHCP. And then when you bring it up in Azure, at least you're going to be able to connect to it, because that's no fun uploading it and then adding it, and then you're like, wow, it's up there, it's running, and then you're like, oh, okay, I just can't do it.
And the other thing you can do is sysprep as well, but you don't need a sysprep, right? If you just want to move a server from on-premises into Azure, there's no need to sysprep it. If you just have the single IP address, remove all the multiple and any funny hardware things you might have on it, and then it's just going to upload. And when you start it up again, if you've done all the AD things like configure the site, it's going to boot up, it's going to get its IP address, it's going to register with AD, and it's going to go, oh, I'm in this site now, and all is good.
Yep.
So let's have a look at the demo. We'll skip through that, and the next slide should say the word demo, which is really good because we like demos. So I'm going to flip across to my machine here and actually have Hyper-V running on my machine. And a couple of days ago, I created a machine called Test VM. Loads of imagination goes on. If I have a look in the settings, this is just a standard thing. I've got a couple of gigs of memory. I did one processor, nothing fantastic. But this virtual hard disk is in this folder, dev, VHD, mytestvm, mytestvm.vhd. Yeah, I know. Not a mention of bacon or David anywhere. It's actually running a Server 2012, which is kind of cool. And I actually use this as my test machine. And this is the first part of a demo I'm going to finish in about 2 hours.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
You'll come back to it.
I'll come back to it a little bit later. So what I thought was, how do I get this VHD up into Windows Azure? So the first thing I did, and I've already done this bit, is I shut down the machine. It's always a good idea to shut down the machine. The next thing I want to do is go into PowerShell, and I can write some PowerShell script. And actually, before we do that, I do want to load up a tool called Cloud Explorer. And I've already connected this up to Windows Azure, and this allows me to view my storage accounts and containers and VHDs in Windows Azure. And you can see I'm in the VHD folder, and I've got a bunch of VHDs that we've created previous, including the Cloud VM demo server here. And what's really funky is, even though these VHDs are actually running, so if you flip across into here, and you can see IIS VM0 is actually running, I can still go and do some pretty neat things, and I think I can just drag that and make a backup of that. And if I jump in there, and it takes a good few seconds because we kind of do a shadow copy here, we've now got a copy of that disk. Now, what's interesting is this was running, so there's always a little bit risk there that there was some kind of unfinished update being written or whatever. So if you did want to do a real kind of backup, you might want to shut the virtual machine down and then do the copy. But just to show you how quickly we can move these files around once we're in Windows Azure, I wanted to kind of show that. And of course, if I wanted to download this, I can just click on download, and then we're going to give the VHD a local file name, and it's going to start downloading that 127 gig file there. And of course, we could also use the tool to kind of upload, and I've got two upload commands here. And it's worth mentioning that all of the VHDs are stored in a particular format called page blob format. And this is just highly compatible with the way we interact with disks, as opposed to the way we interact with other objects that you might store, such as movies and that kind of thing. So I could upload a page blob and then go and find a VHD on my machine. In fact, I could jump into my VHD folder here, pick that VHD, click on open, and it would start the upload process. Now, we do have support for this in PowerShell as well, and since we love PowerShell, we're going to go ahead and use this. And this entire script actually moves my VM into Azure and creates a new virtual machine from it. The challenge in giving you this full demo is we're bound by the speed of the network.
Right.
So I'm going to start the kind of upload process, but if we just sat and watched it until it was finished, it would take a little bit of time, I guess. So I'm going to highlight this bit, and we specify the source. And in fact, I'm going to show you, because I can draw better circles than David here. Because what you don't see is we actually have touch monitors, and the other David, didn't realize. So you can actually draw some really good, kind of very good stickman on there. There's my happy Azure person.
I think that I still draw better with my mouse.
You probably. Oh dear.
Oh yeah.
Then we're going to upload this into a storage account, into an uploads folder, and then we're going to start the upload command. So if we just highlight that, click on OK, this will start the process away and start copying. And this command will actually return once it's done. And now the first thing we go and do is we go and create an MD5 hash of the file. Once we've done that, we'll start the upload process. Now, even though we have a 127 gig file, we don't copy 127 gigs up there. That would be silly. We only copy the actual data within that file into Windows Azure. So that's kind of pretty cool, and it obviously won't take as long as you might expect. So that's literally what we do to copy a VHD in. Now, once it's on the other side, let's jump back into the web portal here. What it will do is it'll show up as a disk, and actually, if we flip back here and look in the uploads folder, it's like I don't know. Here's a cooking show. Here's one I baked earlier up there. Copied this up a couple of days ago, and you can see the size is like 31 gig there, and I'm pretty sure the size on disk is that's weird. It's 8. Now, I want to explain that. I say that's weird, and then I kind of went, this is why I'm coming here. This is actually the dynamic disk format. It's not the fixed disk format. But when we upload it, it goes back into the fixed disk format. So that's why this is 30 gig, I think, instead of just 8 gig on disk there. But we will only copy the data within that kind of disk there. So if I want to kind of go and build a VHD out of this, then all I need to do is add a disk for it. And I can do this using PowerShell, but I'm going to show you how to do this through the UX as well. So first of all, I'm going to go into storage. I'm going to go into my, I'm looking at the screen and there's, oh, here we are. It's the 881, sorry. I was like, this is why you should name your own storage accounts, because they all end up being called portal, and you'll never know which one to kind of click on in the demo. So if I go into containers here, and the portal allows you to go and browse through and kind of pick and view containers and that kind of thing. You can see this new one's being copied up there. It hasn't got there yet. But we're going to grab the URL for that because we're going to need it in a second there. So we'll go and create a disk. We're going to create a new disk. We need to go and dig into this and go into uploads, and we should get our little VHD appearing there. That's the one I did earlier. We can give this a name, my test VHD OS. I always like to label my disks that have an OS on and put OS in somewhere, so that when I'm looking, I know which ones are OS, which ones are kind of data disks. We also have to tick this box to tell Windows Azure that it's an OS. Otherwise, it won't treat it like an OS disk. And we also have to decide what type of OS is on there. And this is just letting giving Windows Azure a heads up so it knows what to do there. We'll click on OK, and that's going to now create a Windows Azure OS disk based upon that. Now, it's going to take a few seconds to do that. We're essentially not really creating a disk. We're just kind of connecting up to the VHD. So Azure kind of knows what to do with it. Now, once that's happened, what we can do then is we can create a virtual machine from that disk. And we can do that in exactly the same way as we create any other virtual machine. We can create through PowerShell. We can create it through the gallery as well, and it'll actually show up as one of the disk images. So that's created. Ding. We're going to go ahead and create a new machine from gallery. And if I go to my disks, and it might take a few minutes for the portal to pick this up, but we will actually get our new disk appearing in the list there. We're going to give it a few minutes, and we're not going to do a few minutes of awkward silence, despite how funny that might be to us here. So that's moving a VHD up. We'll flip back to the slides and just walk through a couple of more things, and then we'll come back to the demo machine. So getting a VHD up there, super simple. What about applications that run in there? Well, if I could hit the right button, we'd be awesome.
This is the David and David show, right?
It's
all kinds of awesome.
It's all kinds of awesome, and it's like can't remember how this slide builds. And how many times you got to click, and then you kind of go.
Don't tell anybody that.
Okay.
Come on.
Like, come on, we've been on air for like 5 hours or something. So there's a few things you can do. If you're moving an application, you've got a couple of choices, right? One is, as we've just seen, we can upload a VHD, and that all works fine. Obviously, you've got to deal with uploading a few hundred gigs potentially of OS and an application. The other way to do this is you go and build a virtual machine in the cloud from one of those gallery images, and then you go and install your application on there. So it's like deploying your application to a new machine. And that sometimes is a little bit quicker depending upon the complexity of the application and the kind of prerequisites that you might have there. One interesting thing is that all of the virtual machines within the same kind of virtual network are going to be able to communicate together, and we use this as a kind of a boundary, if you like, for controlling your applications. Now, there are some kind of interesting things, because if you want to segregate your applications into virtual networks and have different applications in different virtual networks, it increases your complexity of creating virtual networks and connecting to the virtual networks. So quite often you want to deploy all the applications into the same VNet and with the same connection back down to on-premises. Virtual machine migration, just a recap, we are using the VHD format. The dynamic VHD format will be converted before we upload. You have to do something about VHDX. You can upload existing VHDs, like we showed, with third-party tools or the PowerShell. And a couple of things you might want to do before uploading the OS disk, and David mentioned some of these things earlier, is remove any extra network adapters. Make sure you're not using a static IP address, and then you should, and then enable remote access, remote PowerShell as well, and then you should be good there. So migrating a simple virtual machine. Now, we've talked about virtual machines. David added a disk to his domain controller. It's the same kind of setup, and the things you've got to think through are really, what size disks do I need? The drive letters may indeed change, because remember, we've got this D drive, which is going to be our temporary drive, and then we've got other data drives that we're going to upload and attach. So there may be some drive letter changes going on there. We've also got to decide what size machine to have, because we won't have a 12 gig 3.5 core machine, the same that you've got under your desk, right? You've got to pick one of the standard Windows Azure machine sizes. And sometimes sometimes it's great, because it takes all choice out of it, right? It's not like you've got to go through your favorite hardware vendor's site and try and decide like exactly what type of processor do you need. So I always look at it as a benefit, because you can do it really quickly.
Well, yeah, and and right, it's not. Why don't I go talk to my team and say, hey, can I get $10,000 to get a new server? Yeah. And can I?
And have you ever got that wrong, where you've ordered a server and it's been, you've kind of got a bit trigger happy and thought, well, it's the beginning of the financial year.
Why don't
I'm going to get a few extra cores, and SSD drives are always really cool, so we'll get a few of those and an extra hard drive controller and that kind of thing.
My boss gave me, I got approval for 20 grand. I was really shooting for only needing 10, but
I'm going to buy a 1999.
Yeah, let me see all the bells and whistles I can get on there, as opposed to 54 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Or 5 cents an hour, or whatever. That's not so exciting, but
yeah,
it's nice to have it fast and easy. And
it is. And what's really good about Windows Azure, though, is you can actually go and change the machine size. And we haven't kind of shown that yet, so I must remember to go in there. So even if we guess and start off with 4 cores, and then we go, actually, we only need 2, we can go in and change the machine size and reboot it, and essentially we've replaced the hardware, right?
And this is where monitoring, my little tie-in to the monitoring session, because if you monitor the utilization of your servers, you now have another metric of possibly automating, scaling and scaling down your resources. Right?
Absolutely. So migrating a simple virtual machine, if we flip back onto the slide there, there's some high-level migration steps here. First of all, let's get the VHDs up there. We'll upload those. Once we've uploaded them, we want to create a new virtual machine from those VHDs. And then we may need to adjust the drive letters as we've just described. And then we have to decide, do we want to open up any public internet endpoints? Now, if we have a virtual network, we might not want to open any public endpoints. But if we're deploying a web app or something and we want everyone to access it, then maybe we do. So let's go and have a look at a little bit more of well, we'll go and first of all see if that disk's appeared in the gallery, and then we'll have a look at a little bit more of a complicated application, or I shouldn't say complicated, I mean marketing, a more sophisticated application. That's what I meant.
There you go.
That's how we change complicated in marketing. So if we go into my disks, you can see my test VHD OS. It says DOS, isn't that funny? So I'm going to select that, and then here I get to pick my virtual machine name. This isn't going to be the server name of the machine. This is just the name of the machine as it appears in my Windows Azure list. Now, when you create a virtual machine from scratch, we actually give it the same machine name because we've got to give it a machine name. But this is different here, so I can call it Bacon Test VM. Pick which size machine I want, and I'm 8 cores and 56 gig of RAM.
Oh,
obviously, it says up choke. You might have to pay a little bit more for this one. That's what the little warning says.
You are going to have a good conversation with your boss with your 4,000 compute hours, aren't you?
Yeah, like whatever that SharePoint test team's doing, I ain't going to get anywhere near it with this kind of thing. Did you see that?
That's true. That's true.
And that's just one of the accounts they're using. So we still need to give this a DNS name. So my baking MV test 343. And then we pick, again, like any other virtual machine, which network we want it on and which subnet we'd like it in. On here, I'm going to put it in the web tier subnet just for fun. And then we'll go and create that. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But we'll go and create that, and now we'll start provisioning that VM. Now, what's great about this is it's not a sys-prepped image. It's going to just start up. So it's going to be super quick. This machine's just going to literally boot up, and we're going to be able to connect to it, and it's all going to be great. Now, while that's booting up, let's go and have a look at a little bit more of a sophisticated application. And this is my Contoso production application here. So we've got these 4 virtual machines that I've already deployed here. And the way I did that is exactly what we've just been talking about for the last hour or two. We created a virtual network called Contoso CloudNet. Inside that virtual network, we defined some subnets, and we've deployed these machines to some subnets. We also connected this to our on-premises network, where our domain controllers reside. We did this a few weeks ago. That's why there's some traffic that's why there's a few gigs showing up on there. We've deployed, at the advice of my colleague David, a couple of domain controllers for a high availability, and we're going to talk about why we did 2 in a moment, as well as a database server and a web server. And this database server and web server, we're actually running on Hyper-V on-premises. We uploaded it using the PowerShell scripts. We've just seen how to do that. Once they were there, we created virtual machines, and they just kind of popped up and appeared inside of the domain again. I could log into them with my domain credentials, and everything was fine. In fact, the application, Con EXP Web, is actually running an expenses application, which is the old patterns and practices sample application from many years ago. This is a legacy application. It's not running the latest version of .NET and everything. So we've just, instead of redoing the application, we've just moved the VHD into Windows Azure, and it just works. It's great. It's just
there you go.
Remember, it's just Windows.
It's magic.
It's powerful magic.
That's right.
Actually, it's not. It's just Windows Azure, and it's just cool.
That's right. Well, it's removing this complexity. It's
yes.
It all works, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So this is our network. The virtual machines were configured exactly the same way we've just talked about. We've got a domain controller, 2 domain controllers here, and the reason why we have 2 domain controllers, and we're going to get into this, I think in the next section, is for a high availability. So we'll come back and talk through that in a moment. And then we've got the database and the web. And if we click into the database, you can see we actually have a data disk as well. And we just uploaded that data disk and attached that data disk to the virtual machine, just in the same way as we created and new ones there. So that is our application. Once you've got your domain up there, it is pretty straightforward to go and deploy servers, move VHDs. There are still domain joined, so things just work. And the first time I did this was I was kind of like, ooh. Because when the virtual machine started and I connected to it, I was expecting to have to do more things. But the reality is, once you've got your domain and your site set up, it all just works. It's just like the machine starting up again. You can have a bit fun by restarting the machine on premises. Then it gets all funky.
Yeah.
Because then you have two machines trying to be the same thing
name.
in different sites with the same SIDs and different site names and things like that. So I don't recommend you spend a lot of time doing that.
And to if you wait till the end here, the hybrid scenario, we do have a number of tools to help you put a management layer on top of that. So this is great if you want the manual. I'm going to move it myself, do it by PowerShell, and fork it up there. But we do have tools like System Center that will automate this and allowing you to move it up there and use a GUI or have some fanciness wrapped around it, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I think that really wraps up this session, and we're not going to have a break between this session and the next session. So this is the end of session 6. We're going to pause a little bit.